while I know $1 million is a drop in the bucket, it certainly is helpful, and we could have gotten nothing. So I think I can speak on behalf of the committee that we are grateful and appreciative for that $1 million, and we will certainly be putting it to good use.
I brought it up during finance last night, and they kind of. I'm not gonna say.
Well, I think that, you know,
I mean, we have to thank them, because if you don't, I mean, she tried her best. The sessions I think are over. I think they're done now for the summer.
yeah.
And she put in, and she knows what we need here, because I've talked to her personally, I know her, and she knows what we need here.
Well, it comes down to, would we take the world? Of course we would.
Yeah.
But we have to be grateful for what we
Exactly.
get, and say thank you and be appreciative, and then,
It's like we're not our kids, right? Like, obviously, you know, you'd love to get a fancy car for your birthday every year from your grandparents, but you thank your grandparents for the gifts they give you, right? And you teach them that you could be getting nothing.
Yeah.
So,
You said grandparents or parents buy the car first?
oh, well, don't tell my mom. Anyway.
but this should also be looked at as, I feel, as a stepping stone also. Now that the lines of communication are open, and we know that, you know, this is certainly a possibility, I think we need to, you know, continue our efforts and continue reaching out and engaging, and hope to try to.
I think, I forget which one of you just said it, because we're in summer brain, I guess, but I think the most important thing about this is that we know they hear us. We know that they realize that there is an issue at Applegar School. You know, I don't remember when it was, I don't think you were on the board yet, we definitely weren't, when there was a tour of Applegar with the legislators, I don't know, Dr. Lehman.
I thought that you were here with Carmen.
When that was. Yeah. So definitely.
Reminded me of a movie years ago where something was a flower that got real big and it ate everybody.
House of Horrors.
It's got horrors.
Those are,
The boiler, that's what it looked like, it was gonna come and engulf the children, and I was like, what is this?
but anyway, so I think that, you know, going all the way back to that time when there were, you know, prior boards, you know, prior administration, just sharing some of their concerns. I think it was, Mr. Repollet was the commissioner at the time, who came down. And, I think just seeing the work of, you know, not just us on our committee, but just the work of, you know, our board, prior boards, prior administration, I think is just really important, as well as community members, right? Because ultimately, there's strength in numbers, right? That's what we've always said. So by the community members really reaching out saying, hey, this is a problem, you know, the more voices you have, the more you're heard, and I think that's something.
Let me just make a comment too. Hi, this is Chrissy. I'm on remote. We are very appreciative, and I did write a letter back to Senator Greenstein, thanking her for her efforts. The only frustrating part is that this committee has been asking Senator Greenstein to come to a committee meeting for the last 2 years, and she's declined that, and she never did ask us specifically what our needs were with Applegarth. And yes, we are very fortunate to get that $1 million, but the price tag to fix what needs to be fixed at Applegarth is $11 million. So we're still short $10 million to do what we really need to do. So I have reached out back to her. I've invited her and whoever else she wants to bring from the Department of Education to possibly sit down with the Finance Committee and our business administrator to go through the actual needs of our district. And going forward, maybe she could advocate for more funding. I know the state is giving the township money to expand the police department. It would have been really nice if they gave us money to fix our schools.
Yeah.
So noted.
Anybody else have any comments?
No.
I think just collaborating with that, along with also realizing that, you know, it's a much bigger problem than just that one thing, right? Because it all goes back to the state funding, which is nothing we haven't discussed over and over, right? Because ultimately, if we got the funding every year that we needed, we wouldn't need the special funds to fix this. At the same time, it's, you know, also remembering that we need the help to fix it. It's also our responsibility to fix it. It's just a collaborative effort between all the parties involved.
Yeah, it's nice to see, because when we go to the April vote, and I'm gonna knock on wood right now that it passes, but if it doesn't, at least we have collaboration with the mayor and council and the people in the community. So, and if we get out there and tell them all the things that are so well needed. And Middlesex County, I haven't met yet with them this summer. I read the list, I think at the last meeting, and one of them was meeting with the administrators in the assembly, and but not going there with a yelling attitude, but going there with, this is what we need, and this is how we can fix it, but we need the money for it. So like telling them how we need the money, not telling them, give us the money. So, and a lot of other topics that they're gonna help, fair funding. There's a lot of topics they're gonna work on. I can't guarantee they're gonna be done, but they're gonna work on it.
Yeah, I think it's that whole you catch more bees with honey than vinegar, is that the thing?
Yeah.
Something like that, where.
Question to follow up on what Ms. DePena just said, if you don't mind, Ms. DePena.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you say, provide them with like, you were saying like specificity, you think,
Mhm.
like being very itemizing particular projects?
Exactly. They suggested at the Middlesex County meeting that we had, that you go there to them and say, we're from Monroe and such needs the roof, and it's gonna cost us 10,000. We're just wondering, maybe, you could subsidize half, and we, have a solution for them to work on, not just go there and shove the paperwork at them. Because they're busy, and give them some backup, demographics, data, as much as you can give them, then make a reasonable decision for the district.
So
That's what they told us.
almost like a packet maybe of the priorities.
Yes.
What has been done, what are, because we have, like, obviously we can share with them the referendum, which listed some of our needs, but, the average person may not be as involved, might not know, well, this is our highest need, this is our
Right.
second highest
Right.
need, and then what the costs are, what has been done so far.
And that's exactly what they said to go in with, an itemized list as to and prioritize what's needed.
So if I,
Sure.
so that sounds, obviously, I think that that's fantastic, and it's actually very similar to the approach that we had begun taking with the town. Last April, we had a fantastic meeting, immediately after the referendum as part of our promise to the community to discuss next steps, and the town had asked us to do just that. We have created that, Mr. Tague has, put together some estimates.
So you're not
And-
reinventing the wheel.
No, and this was in motion since April, and in fact, including the priorities. And we're excited to follow up on that as well, where as soon as the town, is ready to meet with us on that, we'll be ready to go. And, if we can start getting some of the support from, like you said, whether, well, hopefully both at the state and local level, I think this would be a nice creative way, move forward, without slowing down our, from our perspective, like we were talking about in a curriculum, I worry about the curricular evolutions that, with some of the things like we're starting this summer and how we can sustain those in the face of these considerable facility challenges.
Right. That's definitely an
Yeah,
issue
so-
here.
Yeah, that could be on the list, and, I would emphasize educational loss challenges to them and how it would affect the children.
And Applegarth is absolutely, we'll take any help we can get. And it's important, though, I also want to remind, just from my perspective, trying to develop some of these programs at the middle school and throughout the district, it's one of major, it's a major priority, clearly, but I worry a lot about some of the eminent needs at the middle school as well. Especially as we're learning this time of year with the excessive heat and some of those.
Sitting through some of those middle school concerts, it was definitely eye-opening, and like, my husband's down in that wing all the time, but he sleeps with a hoodie, I sleep in like shorts, so he doesn't really care as much, but I was like, this must be unbearable for some of the staff members and students that are in there day after day. So, sometimes it's almost like seeing is believing, and you obviously read the problems, that they're there, but when you experience them for yourself, that you really understand.
And those are the hidden challenges too. So we actually, and I'm sure the musicians would remember this, but a couple of years ago, we've been struggling with some of the challenges with the aging systems throughout the district for a while now. And aside from making us uncomfortable, they work things like our grand piano was, now, like, for example, in our tech labs, we have some sophisticated robotics technology and stuff like that that do require certain environmental conditions. So that's why when we talk about these systems priorities, they're so critical. And nowadays, because everything's so electronic, and I don't want to speak outside my area of expertise, it just drives the cost up and the subsequent maintenance up.
Well, that's why you're there, because of your area.
And no, Ms. Monroe, you're so right, like, you know, having been a band teacher for 10 years, I remember you always talked about how the instrument closet should be between a temperature of 68 to 72 degrees, because the metal, you know, the brass can expand and crack, and then it actually causes further issues with some of these instruments, like you mentioned the piano, which is a big one, that, you know, then costs more money to maintain as opposed to what it might before. So it's all of this, you know, one thing ties into another, and if we can stop these problems from happening at the get-go, then hopefully we won't have to pay that money to fix it.
And I think that comes back to the discussion of how do you maintain the school district while simultaneously evolving it? And in Monroe, as we all know, because we've been, all of us are pretty much either in town or grew up in town, right, at this point. So the growth from a group 2 school in 2000 to group 5, in less than 25 years, the strain on the infrastructure, forget about it, and obviously the costs associated with that. Plus, we have a community, and we're running it this summer, just studying the way our programs are evolving. These programs are very expensive. Even not just the technology and STEM, but the music as well. You know, we're looking at exploring strings programs, which Schneider and I were talking about that this morning, but pursuant to what we just spoke about, the first thing you have to do is, all right, you have these bass and violins that will be utterly destroyed in poor environmental conditions. So we can't even have that conversation until we know that we can house these assets properly. We were in a industrial arts lab earlier today talking about the vision for how we're going to evolve with these more sophisticated computer science expectations. But I would have to make sure that if you're going to scaffold that down to middle school, that you got to make sure that they're okay. Before I would ask the board or the kind of community to invest in those types of things.
It's definitely, you know, it's unfortunate that the curriculum offerings have to be limited because of infrastructure and, you know, building concerns. And I think this topic had been briefly brought up during the referendum time, but, you know, I'm sure, you know, Mr. Tate's been doing this for so many years. I'm sure he has a process which he follows. I wonder if there is something that's available to the public to say, like, every 5 years we renovate, or not renovate, but repair certain things to the roofing on this building. You know, like a maintenance plan.
You gotta have a proactive maintenance plan. You just can't wait for it to fall apart.
Right, and we do have a long-range facilities plan.
There is a replacement plan for all of your equipment.
Okay.
What Mr. Tate highlighted last night, and he also presented another possible solution that relates to collaboration and ability to address some of these larger projects more quickly than, you know, biting off small pieces as you go through. There's a systemic kind of replacement, but we, because of our growth over time, have had to prioritize dealing with the growth and dealing with the influx of students over, you know, the mid 2000s, late 2010. So where we had several $1 million that was allocated annually to capital projects, there were years that we did stopgap projects, which we then, if it was a roof opportunity, we would do the stopgap in lieu of the roof, and now you're off cycle. So we are in this position just because we've had to make choices along the way. So it's not necessarily that there isn't a plan to address that. It's just things that happen along the way that kind of put us off cycle. So in the meeting last night, he presented another solution. ESIPs is what it's called. And, you know, we're going to invite a company back in to kind of get into more depth, but it's an opportunity to, like some of the other grant opportunities, this is not a grant, but this is kind of a way to take money that we would save and use upfront to replace costs, then we can recoup energy costs in the long run. But we could do larger projects without having it hit our capital and our budget all in one shot. So we have solutions. Solutions with partnerships is probably the way we can solve some of these problems. So.
And like, I just want to say, like, I think it's honestly a testament to our teachers, to our administration, that we have had such an influx over the last 15, 20 years, because, I moved to Monroe because I heard the great quality of education, and I know that there are a lot of other people that did, and so in a way, like, I don't want to say you guys caused the problem, but in a way,
I'm sure I didn't.
because, there were just such phenomenal things being said about the schools in Monroe, we've had this, large growth, and, now we just need to, it comes back around to find a way to fund, the similar types of programs as well as expanding with what we have.
Okay, just one thing, I know you want to keep going. I just like what you said, and I wrote it down because I wanted to remember, curriculum versus infrastructure. That's important, and that should be something that should be at the top of the list when we take it places. Our curriculum and our students versus the infrastructure, something's got to be done, it's not working.
Right, and obviously safety is always first,
Of
right?
course,
So
safety
like
too,
in that sense,
yeah.
the infrastructure, but then you think about how it
Everything,
influences.
but I mean, I thought, when you said that, I said, boy, that's it right there, that's it. What has to be done?
I'm happy to have things that you write down.
I did, I wrote it down right here.
So this kind of, I don't want to go out of order in the agenda, but this does kind of tie in with the letter writing campaign that we were talking about, because again, in fostering that sense of collaboration with our elected officials,
Yeah.
is that something that we still want to pursue? I don't want anybody to feel like we're bombarding or attacking them in any way, but this letter writing campaign could also be another way to engage the community and, really have the voices of the community heard, by writing letters.
And we have to.
I think, we were sort of given, the blessing of that weird air quality thing where now we're in a little bit of a different situation where we know that our voices are being heard, but we also know that there's more that needs to be done. Maybe we modify what the body and the content of that letter is, like, thank you for hearing our concerns. Here are, while this certainly.
We appreciate your assistance so far. However, there are additional concerns or needs that our district has, and we, kind of word it in such a way where we.
Well, didn't we wanted to also get other districts around us, which I have a list, unfortunately, I left that pad at home someplace, of other districts that lost money, that we were gonna get them involved with the letter writing. And I had at least 5 to 7 other districts that I spoke to, and wherever I was, and I found out there was a district, did you get
I
one?
think it was at the association meeting, the county
At the
meeting.
Middlesex County meeting, and I know South Brunswick had it, and it was taken away, and I asked a few others, and then I also talked to a couple other people, and, I think I have 6 or 7 that was interested. So not only should we do it here for ourselves, I think we have to start it. We have to be the spearhead of this project, and it has to include us, and then we can maybe
Branch
send out a sample letter to the other districts and say, you want to get on board with us? Would you like to do that? But I think Monroe has to be the
So
spearhead.
I think sorry. I was gonna just say, like, I think that we definitely need that strength with other districts. I think we need to be careful with, not necessarily who we're partnering with, but we all have different concerns, right? So districts like South Brunswick, I think Tom's River is another one. They, did not have the same issues necessarily with the actual funding formula that we've had, right? We've actually, while we're still not getting nearly our fair share, we're getting more than we were 5 years ago, maybe by almost double. Whereas, I think Freehold Regional is another district that's gotten hit very badly by the S2 legislation. And then, this year there was like a modified bill to give back, one time only some of the losses that they had, had to endure. But, I think they wouldn't necessarily want to see like the actual funding formula totally revised. They would rather just see S2 go away. So I think that, we would need to start with finding those districts that are really in a very similar situation, maybe large growth, not a large increase in the funding formula, and start there. And then you can obviously expand, but I think the first thing is just starting in Monroe.
It has to be here first, right?
Yeah.
If I, just as a thought, because if you had remembered a couple of meetings ago, sorry, you can point it. If you had remembered a couple meetings ago, you had asked us to look at the
Yes,
funding, when we did, when
I
we
was
looked
just gonna
that up.
bring that up.
Yeah, and it was good exercise, but I think what we learned was that where we were going up, some of these other districts were going down. So a cohort approach, I wonder if it would become almost like oh, what are you asking for?
It's not-
Or
yeah,
like, what are
right.
you at? And then it becomes almost like a little bit of well, who's lobbying harder
Yeah.
type thing. And I'd be curious, maybe like I would maybe we look at that historically about how the money flows. Particularly within the fact, because I think we broke it down by factor group and then
Yes,
by
yeah, you were.
regional partner.
Mhm.
And whether the state, again, I still can't understand the formula. I don't know if anyone can, but I wonder if is it gonna ebb and
They
flow?
understand it.
I mean,
You know, if
we
you know
have
what
that really
Sanskrit-
nice breakdown.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, I needed like a Rosetta Stone now.
Yeah, there was last year before we had gone to Trenton to meet with Senator Greenstein
okay.
and the members, from the DOE. A community member broke down the funding formula, like
Wow.
basic, like pretty
Hmm.
easy to understand. Still not easy, but easier than just being like, here's the formula. If you haven't seen it,
Yeah, I'll definitely take a look at it.
yeah,
And I think when we had looked at it as an administrative team, what had bothered us, kind of pursuant to what we just spoke about earlier, was how it hadn't really been updated. But we sure know
No, it
Monroe has been
hadn't.
updated, right? So the variables that were being considered, and this would be something I'd be interested if we ever had the chance to ask Senator Greenstein, would be, you know, how are the variables in this formula relative to Monroe and how radical our changes have been? Was that the consideration what was the tipping point that got us that 1 million?
Yeah.
And how do we then show them whatever it was they were looking at was that the variables that you're analyzing is, we're on the right track, but we need to show you elsewhere, the lack of ratables, whatever it is, the disproportionate tax base. And then see how maybe we could attack the formula that way.
Yep.
But back to my original point, my guess is that school districts are gonna be looking at us now and saying, what did Monroe do last year to get that increase in money? And
That's true.
how do
So
we get
maybe we just keep it with in-house. And
I think
you know
that's where
what,
we have to start anyway.
We have
We
to
start
start
here,
taking
and
care of
then
ourselves.
if we start,
here,
becoming successful with it, then we can share, like, this is what we did.
but
And then kind of work in collaboration to try and branch out from there, but I think we just need to start here.
it has to be here first.
If we want to, if we want to do some sort of letter writing campaign, I think it's around the funding formula. And I think that's what we had mentioned last time, the task force. I think we write, to Senator Greenstein and the other legislators in our district that we want them to push for that task force to be formed, because that's when the funding formula will be looked at, is if that bill goes through and they actually form that task force that the governor had been talking about, for the last couple of years. Until that gets passed, they're not going to look at that formula. And I mean, look at, quite honestly, as Mr. Moraldo said, a lot of districts that have, like Vin Gopal, his district gets a lot of funding. He's not going to be so quick to say, yeah, hey, let's reevaluate this formula. And possibly my districts are going to get less and go somewhere else, and I'm not going to win my reelection. It's very politically driven, and we have to push our legislators who represent us to push for this funding formula task force, for them to look at this formula and really revamp it to where it needs to be, and take into consideration the things that hurt Monroe, which is, the percentage of our population in the senior community. I mean, Katie, you're right. We had a huge breakdown of the formula from a member of the community, and it dealt all with the equalization aid and the lack that we get. South Brunswick, these other districts gets millions in equalization aid. Monroe gets zero. And it was tied back to the population and the wealth that is, that we're considered to be a wealthy district, and all the factors there. And it has an inherent flaw for Monroe because of our makeup of our population. So if we want to, if the committee wants to draft a letter and present it to the board to, send to our legislators and ask all of our residents to do the same, to push for this funding formula task force bill to be approved, I would be all for it. Absolutely.
So I think that, what we definitely, that's definitely a good place to start. And I think that what we need to do is really show, like, if this, formula isn't adjusted, we're trying our best, and like, we've said it at meetings, right? Like, we are trying our best to move these puzzle pieces around so we still have that full puzzle, but ultimately, like, I know, like, Ms. Kirby, you mentioned, Ben Gopal, the Freehold Regional is in his territory, and one of the things where, when I had looked, to kind of do my due diligence from other districts, when I went to that website, there is an actual whole page that's called Advocating for Our Students. And then it lists, like, here is how we've been affected, here is what we're about to lose. So they were going to eliminate courtesy busing. And then it was, here's how you can reach your legislators, because they're so big over like 6 townships, I guess they have different, county reps here and there, but, saying like, this is what we need in order to not lose the things that are important to us. And I feel like, I'm really appreciative, having students of, kids of my own that are students in the district, that we're not losing programs. At the same time, sometimes you need a little bit of that fire, like, well, I don't want to see this. I don't want to have to pay for programs that were free. I don't want to have to have my first grader walk 2 miles because this is being eliminated, to sort of really, get the community behind how important this really is, right? Because we've done a good job handling this. I think that, what they did is they literally had an FAQ, elimination of courtesy busing. Like, why are we eliminating it? What can be done? How are students going to be getting to school? All of these things. And sure enough, there was a separate bill in addition to the ST relief for the courtesy busing funds to be given back to Freehold Regional.
Yeah, I saw it.
And so they're a little bit of a larger district than we are, but at the same time, it's sort of that idea of like, oh my gosh, this is really about to be lost. We need to do something right now. And I mean, ultimately, you can only do so much, but I think that that might be something to look at.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was
And
definitely.
you bring that up, and I want to, I've seen it before, and I just want to share, a parent that I know in Freehold had said to me back in, I guess it was early May, that she was very frustrated that her child was going to lose the busing. And I said to her, no, you're not losing your busing. And she goes, no, we are. And I said, no, actually, you're not going to lose your busing, because here's what's going to happen. They're threatening the parents that they're going to lose the busing. The parents are going to be in an uproar. They're going to come out to meetings, and they're going to be yelling and screaming that you can't cut our busing. And then you're going to have your legislators there, Vingo Paul, go back to the state, and the state's going to come in and save the day with the money. They fight for their districts. We don't have that, and we never have had that in Monroe. And that is the difference between what goes on here in Middlesex County and what goes on down in Monmouth County. I knew absolutely day one when I read that story, I laughed. I said, they're not losing their busing. The state is going to give them the money. And they did. And that's the thing. The state has the money to give out, and we're not getting it here. And that's where we need to put the pressure on our legislators here in Middlesex County that represent Monroe Township, and we need to pressure them to get us the funding that we need for our things. And again, I go back to that $1 million. Yes, we are very thankful and very fortunate, and I wrote a very nice letter that day to Senator Greenstein, thanking her and telling her that we're very happy and very fortunate that we're getting that. However, she never reached out to us. She did not come here to meet with us to hear our needs. And at the end of the day, $1 million to put toward Applegarth when the cost is $11 million really is not going to do much for us in the next school year. So yes, I do think we should have a letter writing campaign, and I think it needs to be focused on the funding formula and our needs here in Monroe, and that we need them to help us. Absolutely.
So I guess my question is then, and I agree, we need to have a letter writing campaign, but Freehold, we're talking about Freehold, they were going to lose something and fought for it, right? Like, I know that we don't have the money or the funds that we need, but we haven't lost anything yet. We haven't taken anything away. We keep trying to put more out, put more out, put more out. It's almost, that's what lights the fire under people. When you are going to take, when something is going to be taken away from you, that's different.
And actually, Ms. Gerby, you kind of said that, right? Because a few years back, when they were going to take courtesy busing, right? I mean, my oldest was still very young at the time, but, you know, I remember having watched those meetings and after being elected where, you know, it was a packed house and ultimately it was reinstated. And
It was
you know,
reinstated with cuts in other areas, yes. It was reinstated, but the district still had to cut, they didn't find the money for it. The district had to make cuts in other areas, and I know one of the things that they took out of that budget was the swim team that was trying to get approved for many years. And, you know, if you take one thing, if you can't afford something and you give it back, then you're taking away in other places. So, yeah, listen, that was the conversation that we had at the last board meeting. The administration told us, we are going to come to you with cuts. And that is why we said we'd rather go out to the voters with our budget to see if they would approve it. I understand not everybody was for that, but that's exactly what we were trying to avoid, was going out with cuts in our next budget.
Any comments? So for the letter writing campaign, would I, as a committee, we would collectively draft a letter, Ms. Gerby, or would you draft the letter for the committee to review and then present to the board?
If you and Kate want to take a shot at putting a letter together and then present it to the committee, you know, that I would be for that. However you want to handle it, I would support.
You can put it to help also.
So, yeah, we'll sit down, the three of us, and we'll draft a letter, and present it to you and the board, and then take it from there and see if we can get that up and
and I
running.
think there was a letter a few years back, and what we can do is maybe use that as a basis
As a model.
and then modify it to fit our current day needs, the changes that have, you know, been brought about.
What you're seeing with Freehold put out, can kind of like put some of that in there too. Comparison, this is what's gonna happen at this, and this.
Right, take what we need that will really make the most
Right,
impact.
right.
And, you know, we'll create the letter and then, you know, it's up to, you know, the administration and the board to sort of figure out how to best present it.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, great. So let's go back to item number 1 on the agenda, which is the survey results.
All right.
Long-awaited survey results.
We have no smoke, alerts to,
No.
That was the craziest thing.
here, let me, what do I have?
I would
My
have to, but I feel like.
my packets are all out of order, sorry. This one is for you.
I always make everything look so.
I know, and these, I printed all these before we had the discussion about minding our paper.
I always wondered about that, like as a side note, because I know like as a
What?
kindergarten teacher, you probably use like a lot, and then I also know like.
It's something like, yes, well, hopefully you get the two-sided copy. I did go.
Mr. Mulder, I don't know, I'm seeing.
That's because you, well, no, those been two-sided. I got one for you, Dr. Lang.
Oh, wait, here, I've got the same.
I've been doing
one.
two-sided at home because
Is this
paper
part of
and,
it?
card.
Yeah, that's the actual.
Like the actual answers and then.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, the hard copy results that I'm giving you, they can't hear me if I'm on microphone thing, include the actual responses. This is not something I would publish without redaction, since there are IP addresses on here, letting you, so this is just for the meeting only. I did redact, the third packet I gave you were any email sent in response to the survey or in supplement to the email, those are all redacted as well. So just real quick, because it feels like a lifetime ago, you may recall referendum 2023 in March.
March 14th?
14th? 14th, I believe. I should probably know.
Live in it for so
Yeah.
long.
So, just a brief history, obviously, the referendum had come and went. The official, according to the county, the official defeat was 4,659 for no and 4,124 for yes, and margin of 535 votes. That was taken straight from the website. So what we had done, I was directed to construct a mechanism to solicit feedback from the community regarding the referendum and their approach to referendum and some of the general decision-making drivers that led them to their decision. We had, well, I'll take you through it. So if you just indulge me for a moment, it was in response to what could possibly be a starting point for consideration of what would be next steps. Fortunately, or unfortunately for the survey, but fortunately for the sake of the district, we've been actively moving forward since the referendum by doing things like meeting with the township, constructing priority lists, creative curricular augmentation, some facility changes and things like that. So we didn't necessarily wait for the survey to begin some of the short-term things, but we certainly got a good pulse of how the community was feeling based on the responses that were provided in that group. We, after discussion with some of our tech staff in a way to obtain data that could be easily interpreted and protected, we selected the Blackboard Web Community Manager to facilitate our survey. It's a service that we used to push out alerts throughout the district. We can control who gets it. For this particular survey, we release it to anybody that had signed up for our district messaging. And again, that you don't have to have a student in the district to sign up for those alerts. It can be done on our website. And we encourage all of our community members, whether they have students or not in district, to sign up for it. That's the best way to get information from the district is through our Blackboard community information distribution system. And if you have any questions on how to get on that, email community@monroe.k12.nj.us.
Mr. Monroe, can I ask a quick question
Yep.
about that? I know that most, if not all, of the active adult communities have their newsletters. From a community engagement perspective, I wonder, like, I think, Ms. Buzowski does it, an article
Rossmore News.
in Rossmore, but I'm wondering if, as a district, we might be able to reach out to the people that put it together and offer just a little bit, as well as like the email, to reach if you have questions, as well as like a link to sign up if you want more information.
Yep, I'll talk about that in a minute.
Sorry,
But it's definitely something that we need to continue to build on.
Can I just interject, right?
Yes, ma'am.
I did not get this email survey from board. I got it.
From
Rossmore
Melissa?
sent it to me.
Yeah, Melissa, yeah, so we did, Rossmore happens to be one of our more collaborative, not the others aren't, but we just
Right.
happen to have a pretty good relationship with Rossmore, so they were the first, I happen to know Melissa personally.
Oh, okay.
So Rossmore's been fantastic at helping us distribute
Okay, because I'm
information.
saying, I didn't get it from the school district, I got it from my community.
Mhm.
And it was wondering, because a lot of people had seen it and I hadn't yet. So then all of a sudden I got the.
Yeah, no, Rossmore's fantastic, and that's why we like to go back there for all of our music stuff too.
Yeah, I even know I forgot the name of the company is, but they run like 7 of the newspapers.
Mhm.
For the
Yeah, they
district,
all
which I think
do.
Rossmore might be one. but-
So yes, I'll just jump down to that. So we are building we're calling it the MTSD AAC Partnership Network, which began when,
Where are you reading from?
under methods and period.
It's on the second page.
On this.
It's on the
Yep,
second
yeah.
page, I'm sorry. Gail. So we constructed this initially. The township delivered us a database of active adult communities and other communities that have an HOA, not just active adult communities. During the referendum, we've since updated it. So we also reached out to all of them as a method, not just to distribute the survey, but to do what you had just mentioned, to continue to build out our presence there. We have standing invitation. Some of the communities are already taken us up on it for September. But, and that's just not to discuss facilities and things,
Right.
but just general community engagement. And that is a standing invitation for not just active adult communities, but for all communities, subcommunities, groups, whatever. We also were fortunate enough to have the cooperation with municipal government. They, without hesitation, allowed us to jump on their e-blast, and they made a special reference to that. So that way, we were able to reach a broader audience. I was not able, through our data collection, to disaggregate which method of distribution of the survey prompted which results.
Yeah.
I would have to imagine, just based on the data, which I'll talk about in a minute, most of it came from the Monroe School District methods. We also used our social media and other traditional means. I know many members of social media shared it, and this kind of came into the control section of the survey, which the use of the Blackboard Connect, what that allowed us to do is to control the survey's integrity by limiting 2 IP submissions per per IP address. And we understand that there may be some households with more than two voting adults and some with less. That was generally the average that similar surveys had suggested based on Monroe demographics and things like that. Fortunately, and I have to credit the Monroe community, we had less than 10 instances where more than, two IP addresses voted. So there was no spam voting. And I think really there was only one instance, and we can even look, because I highlighted them in your packet, where there was more than 3 or 4. So my guess is that those were authentic submissions, but,
Right.
in order to maintain consistent, we took 2 random submissions from a singular IP address, but there were less than 10 instances, certainly none of which would have skewed the data. And that's just kind of the results overview. So 671 responses out of our 8,000 plus votes. So obviously a very small, well, not very small, but a marginal response based on those who cast the vote. And now I'll just kind of take you through it. If you want, I'll just kind of take it through quickly and we can go back and discuss questions, or you can ask questions or comments really slide by slide. So reminding anyone who's listening that the results I'm speaking are just for those who took our survey. 671 participants.
And there wasn't even necessarily that they voted, right? Because they could have taken the survey.
They very well could have.
Just.
And listen, I don't think we necessarily needed to know how they voted, but what they're thinking. And I think that was, we know how the community voted.
Yeah.
So immediately, when you look at how the survey results broke down with just based on how they voted, you could probably surmise that participants in the survey are those who probably have a certain disposition about how a school district could be managed, just based on the disparity between this result and the actual result from the county. So you saw it was about 60-40, the 8% chose not to disclose. Again, that was pretty much moot, irrelevant data, but out of respect for the, for the viewer, they chose not to, but then. So then we looked at, and this was something, the next page I thought was very interesting. And it was something that we had learned in our initial after action, which was that the mail-in voting was very, was the dominant force of our yes votes that voted for the survey. So if I was, my very superficial interpretation of this would be mail-in voting is a very real thing. It is not limited to snowbirds. It is not limited to senior citizens. It is not limited to college students.
Yep.
It is something that, regardless of the election, anybody that is going to be electioning or campaigning for anything, whether it be a board seat or gubernatorial election or something like that, mail-in voting is going to be most likely, based on what we're seeing and trending in that direction, going to be a driver of an election. And I think as an organization that is going to be reaching out to the public quite often, I imagine, over the next couple, the next decade or so, as this town continues to evolve, that's something that we should consider. And it also speaks a lot about how a diverse town like Monroe, across age levels, ethnic groups and income groups, they're all starting to vote a very consistent way. That's not to say that election day voting isn't still a major thing that occurs, but I certainly think that this is not something now that we can say is limited to presidential elections or November or major. This is a special election, and I think that mail-in voting is something that should be built into any type of election or campaign.
And this was a change, right? Because pre-COVID, I don't think.
Yeah, this was all based, this is one of those COVID byproducts that stayed. Digital learning, Zoom, delivery, DoorDash. So that was interesting, and I think that's something that we should retain for future efforts. So, just
If
keep
I could
that.
just ask one more question,
Yeah.
for mail-in, do you recall like how early the window is for them to submit those?
Early.
It's like at least a month.
It was pretty early, and and you may remember my comments as someone directing the campaign. I was very regretful of not capitalizing on that window. I think it could have very well have had an impact on the final result. Now, everything happens for a reason, but I think that I would advise anybody trying to direct an outcome in any election to pay very close attention to the mail-in voting process.
And honestly, I really, personally appreciated when you said that, because, with it's the biggest thing you can do, right, is to learn where you may have had an issue so you can, go forward and, modify whatever's done.
Oh, yeah, I
So
mean, it would
saying
be-
that, like, honestly, it was really appreciative.
I appreciate you recognizing that, and I think that it would be disingenuous not to acknowledge it. It
I
was,
do mail in.
yeah,
I started during COVID. My husband will not. He has to go there and push the buttons.
I'm like that too, I like to push
But
that.
he does too. And, I do get it at least 3 weeks to a month before the election. Because they put due dates and then you have to sign, then you have to find the box and, it's not something that you can stick back in your mailbox.
Yeah.
So it's procedural. And, and if you're a senior and you can't get around, it's, unfortunately, I hope they don't ignore it, but they can. But if people are busy and, they're doing things.
Well,
And many
Sometimes they
people
don't
are
even,
busy
some
today.
people, sometimes they don't even know what it is, or they think it's a sample ballot, and
Yes.
they're like, oh, this is garbage.
Mhm.
Do I need this? No.
Yes.
And
No,
sort of-
you're right.
honestly, like Mr. Meralda, sort of said, like, I did a mail-in too, right? I'm not a senior, I'm just a busy mom of 3, and I was like, you know what? Who knows if I'm gonna be able to find the time between
That's right.
pickups and all this, and I have it here now, I'll fill it out, I'll put it in, and that way it's done, right? Because ultimately, you don't know, maybe the air quality will go down and everything will
Well,
be
I mean, I
for
think
the
that's,
day.
and you can't
Could
take
be a
voting
snow-
for granted. Snowstorm, I mean, we could have had a snowstorm on March 14th.
You don't know.
Yeah, and I think that, the other thing, and just not necessarily identified in the presentation tonight, but I feel throughout the campaign, not just myself, but a lot of the community leaders that we spoke to, were fielding a lot of, questions about how to vote in a referendum election. And there was a lot of misunderstanding that the referendum vote functions, and we may run into the same, challenge with the school board vote. And I think that we should pay very close attention to this. There was a lot of confusion about protocol and mechanism. And I think it would be in the board's interest, and the district's interest to take that into consideration as we approach April. And then this would, I think some of the things we learned from the referendum would be a blueprint for how we could address.
Especially to use, to your senior communities, where they have a nice, function or a big meeting, that's different groups. Go in there and, like you said, explain, like, we know, I know all about this from all the years, but a lot of people don't understand, especially that, this is on the assessed value of your home, not what it's cost. And that was the big question for years.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What's your house? No, people don't even know what their house is assessed at.
Right,
So they're thinking, oh my God, I have a $300,000 home and
right.
I'm a senior and, I'm good, but they don't.
Refinance your house, you also get like the market value assessment,
Exactly.
which then you're like, oh, is that the assessment? And-
Exactly, so you don't know, and that really, the more information
Right.
you give people, the more simple
Yep.
information you give people, the better.
Right. And I do think, and I know, Mr. Arnold, you were a big driving force in that with the referendum website. There was a lot of, good information on there. I can't recall specifically if there was the directions to find your assessed value. I mean, ultimately, you could probably Google it, but at the same time, like you sort of said, the ease of information sometimes is also a factor. But
We had the tax calculator, but what we didn't add until, and I want to say it was probably the last 3 weeks of the campaign, was when we started thinking, we started to get these questions about how to vote and where. We went on the website, you may remember, we said, oh wait, the next thing we put on is voting locations. Here's how you get that. If you're not registered to vote, you can't vote. This isn't a PTA election. This is a, and so then we started to direct our attention into orienting voters. And again, coming out of COVID, some people might be a little rusty on what the protocols are.
And new parents moving in,
That too.
like I had said, I think when I don't even know if I was on the boards, put it in the packet,
Mhm.
a welcoming packet.
I think that was like one of our first months
Yeah.
this year.
When I first got, put it in a welcoming packet and say, this is how we're going to do this, this, and this district. And then if they have any questions, they can call whoever. And more information, like I get things listed. I have clubs and things and they have listed dates. They're all on my refrigerator next to my
Mhm.
grandchildren's pictures. So I can go and see what you're trying to, say, oh, I have a question about this. And here's Mr. Moralda's phone number or email. I'm gonna go
Like a
text him
freak
right now.
magnet or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. I mean,
Be
truthfully.
the chain of command on a,
Yeah, right.
on a Mac.
Yeah, South Brunswick has chain of command on their,
We have
on their
ours now too.
cards.
On cards.
On their cards, on their
I know
personal
we worked
cards.
on that last year. That was
Yeah.
the thing. I
What
think
if we pay ourselves?
Let's
I
get
was
back
gonna
to
say, I
the
think we
survey.
brought
Yeah.
this up
Put it in the
quickly.
survey.
The difference between mail-in and provisional, what is that?
Oh.
I know it's a small amount.
Provisional
It's
of
done.
Dr. Lehman might,
It's
as
done that
the,
day.
you're more civics oriented than I am, so feel free to bail me out.
It's done-
I believe that could be like an absentee or a
Yeah,
military.
and it's
or-
done that day because somebody, I worked the
I think you
poll.
might have received a mail-in ballot, but you didn't
You
return it.
didn't
so you
return it,
Had to go and
yes.
fill in a ballot in
Yes,
person.
that's
leave it
exactly
there.
it.
So they
Again,
won't
it's a
cast
small
the vote
amount,
until they.
No, and believe me, I worked 2 years ago, I worked the primaries and the turnout was slow, but we had a couple provisionals that, oh, I didn't get a ballot and I didn't get this, and you just put them at a different table.
Yeah.
And they have to fill the whole thing out, again, and it goes in and it's added as a regular ballot. The machine takes provisionals.
Okay.
I had to go learn all that at Middlesex County College. So, yeah, it's very, very small now.
It's a decent chunk though, when you think about 300.
Right, like
that's-
Yes, yes.
That's
So,
margin,
well,
so, every vote, Monroe, one thing we learned is that every vote's gonna matter.
Right, and maybe they were confused and didn't understand. So here's your big
Completely
amount.
practical, yeah.
Yep.
So again, and I was thinking about how the high school, we take such pride and make strong efforts into registering our students when they're age appropriate. Why do we just spend our efforts on the 18-year-olds on reminding them, since the landscape has changed so much since COVID really forced the voting mechanisms to change. And it is something, elections are razor thin these days, on national, local, and state level. Gail, you'll be interested in this next page. So we tried to get into, this was more about our respondents, kind of what their positions are in the community and the school district. So we looked at residents living in active adult communities with, and those who were not, plus those who were not living in active adult communities that did not have children. And I was happy to see some good participation, obviously, from our our residents and taxpayers that don't have children, but obviously have skin in the game for obvious reasons. 20% of our respondents were living in the AAC. So that does tell me that many of our active adult community residents are still getting our communications. But that being said, and you can see my recommendation there. Not only do we want to get more of our active adults to sign up for our direct communications through our Blackboard Connect, but we'll continue to work with the community clubhouses and the media sources within these communities to get the concise and the strict, explicit information out there. But I was pleased to see that there was some participation there and strong, pretty healthy participation. And we've known for a long time now that the Monroe seniors are very active in the outcomes of all of our activities here in the district and the community at large. All right, so the reasons for voting no from our respondents that voted no, pretty balanced there between the general rejection of the plan overall and the financial implications of the plan, and I don't think that was a surprise. Now, keeping in mind, these are the results from this survey, which was 60% yes. So out of the 40% of our respondents that had disclosed that they voted no, you can see about half of them didn't like the plan, about half of them didn't like the finances. My guess is all of these factors factored in.
And you could vote I forget, you could vote for multiple.
No. I only, sorry. I only asked for, we only allowed them to choose one as their primary reason.
Okay.
That being said, it was of no surprise that they were both pretty split.
Right.
My guess is that, based on the feedback we received from voters that shared their reasons for voting no, it was,
Right.
we didn't like and those decisions can be interrelated.
Right.
If you like the plan, suddenly the finances are a little bit easier to swallow.
Right. I do like the fact, it's a testament to our community where only 6% voted no because there was no benefit, right? It shows that
Yeah,
there
that's a
is an
good point.
interest
Yep.
in supporting education, even if, there's about 31%.
Yeah,
or so
sometimes
that-
I think that can be a little overstated when people just say, well, I don't have
Right.
kids and I don't care.
Yeah.
Listen, you're always gonna find people like that, and I don't think that's necessarily restricted to age. You could have bachelors or,
Right.
People that are,
Or maybe made the choice not to have kids.
I can barely feed myself. Yeah, I think that sometimes when you look at that, people that are voting are gonna have a skin in the game, I think, my personal opinion, living in town for all these years,
Right.
so. All right, so yes vote, again, this was, I don't know how much you want to put into this, obviously, our voters that were voting yes, they were very favorable, supportive. They wanted to come out and move forward. Again, but to go back to what you said, kind of on the flip side of that, 10% voted yes, but didn't like the plan. We appreciate the support, and we appreciate the honesty. But again, our goal as a district is obviously to develop a plan that everyone feels good about, and at least they're convicted in their decision. So we'll continue to solicit feedback and take on whatever information they want to give us. Then you may have remembered that towards the end of the campaign, and this was just for Dr. Lehman and Mrs. Chanley and I, and along with some of the other leadership teams, and obviously this is something that has been discussed in Monroe. It came up on occasion through our community tour and through inquiries, and to no surprise, obviously, I don't think anyone doesn't want full day K. I just think it comes down to, can we have full day K?
Well, this is, I mean, like, this has been a topic of conversation for a while, and I actually, I find this really interesting because, without knowing how much thought they were putting behind this, including an additional program,
Right.
is usually going to increase the cost. Whether or not they were thinking that when they voted yes, I don't know. I mean, I'm in, a unique situation where my son just finished kindergarten, right? So ultimately, almost all the birthday parties I go to would be like, well, why don't we have full day care? They're living in it, they're in that moment, right? Ultimately, if you're not living it, you may not hear about it as much, but, obviously, I would listen, I would try not to talk, because once I started talking, I wouldn't stop, as you guys all well know, but,
I have a similar problem.
yeah, sorry, we get along, but, so I really, I think that like some of the things I was hearing is like, well, one person said, well, I thought they were gonna expand the buildings, why wouldn't they just expand it more, to include full day kindergarten? And someone's like, yeah, I would have totally gone and voted. I think I might have texted, I was like, I need duct tape, right? Because like, ultimately I'm trying not to say anything, but I think that, then the next one where it says that absence of it impact your vote, and,
There was.
no.
I had, and I don't even remember if I shared this with Mrs. Chanley. We had, when that discussion had started to come up, do we start to say that this referendum is the first step to full day kindergarten? When in reality, that is what the board wanted to go. We certainly couldn't go that route without these prioritized needs that we just spent the earlier part of the meeting discussing. But, obviously that would be our white whale, right, of the district. And I think the community wants it, but I also don't think that it swayed the election. I think that was the point of this final slide here. I don't think anyone denies that it would hit. My sister teaches kindergarten in town. We all know that we would love it. I'm sure the parents would love it. But we have, unfortunately, we've got groups and chillers and amongst other things.
Right, so I wonder.
Student safety, obviously.
And I do remember this being on the website where it was like, here are the things we might be able to offer without being able to really specify. But I wonder if you have like, we were sort of talking about the letter writing, not just the things that you might lose, but the things that we could gain, without saying it's going to definitely happen.
We have, in our communications with the municipality, we have been, we did say, and it was included in our letter, that, this is the first step to that. Remediating and addressing these, what has been outlined by Mr. Tagan as long-range facilities plan, but also some of these eminent needs that pop up that unfortunately we don't have the luxury of knowing about in our long-range facility plan, like a leaky roof or a chiller that boiler. I think that, realistically, if that is the want of the community, we can work that way, but we need to, one path is laid, one stone at a time, as they say, and that's the move. Now, and again, it was tempting to tease the public with that as a possible beneficiary of a positive election vote, crossed my mind. But again, I think we owe it to the public to be a little more practical, and it would feel kind of silly to say, hey, we're gonna give you this when there's water.
Right.
Practical and honest.
Right, again,
Yes.
it all goes back to that, safety
You
first.
have to be, and safety first, but you gotta be honest with the community, because once they find out that you lied to them, you're never gonna get their respect to vote again.
Can I
one
ask
thing.
a quick question? With the meetings with the township, and I know like it's been briefly brought up, you know, in our correspondence, just like that there was a meeting. Is it the business, like the town business administrator, like the mayor, like, I guess who's involved? I guess, well, I think I know who's involved for on our side, but on their side.
Yeah, so it was, so that meeting that you referenced was really our referendum task, what do you want to call it, referendum task force, but
Mhm.
our core team at the high school, and we had promised the public that literally right after the referendum, we would get right back to work, and we met with the mayor,
Mhm.
town council, members of the town council, business administrator, and their attorney,
Okay.
and we shared what we shared with you guys. We have priorities. They're costly. Our district does not want to position ourselves to curricular stagnation or certainly not curricular abatement.
Right.
That is not something that this district historically has believed in. And I just don't think we want to go that route now. I certainly want to speak to Mrs. Chandler. But we're excited about seeing what could happen next. And I know Mr. Tague and his office has been working very quickly to try to get estimates and practical timelines and in alignment with these priorities. And we hope that, $1 million here, some more support there.
Yep.
And next thing you know, we're getting right back on track, and we're going to develop this school district the way the community expects.
This is really well done. Thank you, Mr.
So,
Mayor.
yeah, so it's a little, so I think if I could just sum, because I don't know, if that clock says 4:00.
It's
so who knows what
7
that
o'clock.
means. Yeah, so the 4 o'clock, that's like a bad dream in school, right?
Good try.
I think a lot of these things we knew. From my perspective as the community engagement office director, I would say this. We did include in the packet any subjective feedback that we give.
Yeah.
We don't have an ad hoc committee right now. I don't believe we have an intention to set one up. But we'll take a meeting and accept feedback from anyone that asks. We've met with small groups, large groups, individuals have come to the central office to give us their feedback. Community leaders, individuals, inquiry via email, privately, publicly. This is, the nice and exciting part about having a formal position here is that we now have an office now to help collect this, put it together for you guys, whether it be at this committee, whether it be at another forum, and the days of having to orchestrate mechanisms to collect feedback from the community hopefully are over. We'll come to you, you can come to us, and whether it be for a budget vote in April or just a curricular question about anything, we encourage that everyone in the community to come to us. And hopefully, as we continue to do presentations like this, the community will see that we're open, we're providing transparent information, and then if you don't like what we have, we'll go back and we'll try to do it a better way.
Yeah, I don't want to extend the meeting any longer, but the item on the agenda, the NJSBA community engagement presentation, was NJSBA offers training to the board and administrators to come in and provide strategies and information to further engage the community. So like in the survey results, like where you said like it's recommended to collaborate with key stakeholders, that's one of their presentations that they will give to the board. So if that's something that we want to explore.
Can I read the thing?
Yeah.
Real quick. So basically there are, we pay for our New Jersey School Board membership, right? And ultimately, with that, we get a lot of resources, and one of them is, the complimentary training, one of which we did back in March. There are 3 of them, like, you had said, that are, geared towards community engagement, communications. And so I had, just suggested, to Fabian, that maybe we could talk about as a committee, which one might be a good thing for us to bring to the board, which then ultimately it would be up, to Ms. Gerby as board president, or Ms. Shanley to decide, when and where we want to do it. Usually they say best practice is to have the entire board there as opposed to having it as a committee meeting. But the 3 were effective year-round communications, which discusses how to create and maintain communications throughout the year. That seems, The next one is key communicators, which is sort of what, you were just discussing, identifying who may be key communicators in the community to help spread the news of the district. And then there's one that's called public community engagement, which explores ways to foster public engagement. And it's like each topic is, relatively broad, but then can be tailored to focus on the circumstances and needs of your specific district. So, I think we're doing a better job communicating, like, I think I've said this before, like the Facebook page, it's been really great to see that and to highlight a lot of the things going on in the district. I'm sure we can always benefit, right? I love professional development. I would still be going to college if they'd let me. But ultimately, I think we're, effective year round isn't necessarily something that we need as much, but I think both the key communicators in reference to what we're trying to do here, as well as just public community engagement as a whole to help increase it might be something that is worthwhile as a board to explore.
Oh, it definitely is. I think you need all three. In my opinion, the year round, yeah, if you're gonna stop at a certain time and then people are gonna say, they stopped, they didn't tell us anything. Even if it's smaller blurbs in the summertime, do things different between June to August, September, but just let them know that we're still here. But don't give as much, but I would like to see all three.
Well, I'll mention it in my report next week with the full board, and then, if there's discussion around it, or we can, decide if that's something that we want to continue or even discuss at the next meeting next month.
And then I know we're past time. I just wanted to mention if we're going to do the resolution, it's probably something we want to have prepared for next month, because I don't know exactly the date of the fall delegate assembly. I think we're gonna possibly look into impact fees as the topic of it.
Yes.
So maybe when we get, together to collaborate on the letter, we can also collaborate on, the resolution to present maybe next month to the committee and therefore then the full board, so we have it in place in time for approval.
And that you said was done in the fall?
So there's
November.
there's two delegate assemblies. So I think it's October, November. And then usually you have to have the resolution in place at least a month before, to be approved by their committee. So once I see the specific dates, they can let us know, but I think it's always better safe than
Yeah,
sorry.
you're better off starting it. If we're working on one thing, we'll work on both, get them both done.
I mean, we
together.
pretty much know what our priorities are.
Yes. All right, everybody, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.